With doctors willing to strike indefinitely, what should the winner of the next general election do differently to resolve the doctors' pay dispute?
And of course, this week we've had for the first time.
Actually talk to them?
I mean, that's a start, and then from there, also then pay them. It's really simple plan. Just you go to the table and then increase their pay.
Well, have we thought about Pizza Fridays?
True.
As a solution to this? Come on then. Who doesn't like pizza?
Time ever in the history of the NHS, consultants and junior doctors strike at the same time, and junior doctors are still on strike until Saturday. Thank you.
Well, the first thing they should do is talk to them.
Yeah.
I believe it's March since the current health secretary spoke to the junior doctors. I think it's the consultants actually in May since he spoke to the junior doctors. Now, these strikes have been going on some time now. You don't solve them by not talking. And we have a whole range of health workers who put themselves at risk during the pandemic, and we clapped them and we applauded them. We put up rainbows, and rightly so. And what health workers tell me when I speak to them is that it is about pay, but it's not just about pay. It's also about feeling that they're not appreciated.
No, it's not about
I've heard
that.
people say a number of times saying we need to get
Sorry, no, it is about pay, but it's also about the fate of the entire NHS by ensuring that we have enough people working so that people don't feel overstressed and underpaid that they then leave. You have a plan for this. You literally have the non-dom tax that's going to pay for an NHS workforce expansion plan. Why are you talking platitudes like, oh, well, actually the doctors want to feel appreciated, when you have literally one half of the solution already sorted too? And then you can go to the pay disputes knowing that one half of the dispute is already sorted.
Yeah.
But what are you actually going to say? Because you're going to have to offer something.
We're going to have to negotiate, and we do not negotiate live on a TV programme. But you know, there was not a single strike in the NHS during all of the years of the last Labour government from 97 to 2010. And why? Because we kept talking in good times and bad. We kept talking when things seemed like they might actually be fine.
So when it comes to these strikes, forgive me for interrupting, when it comes to these strikes, what you're asking people to believe is we'll get round the table, we'll solve it somehow, but we won't tell you how.
Well, do you know what? If they leave it until after the next general election, that could be another year. I mean, really, are we really saying that the Tories think...
Also, to a degree, like that's a really stupid point that Fiona Bruce makes there, because, they're not able to negotiate with the junior doctors because they're not the government. No. So, they can't exactly tell you everything that they would potentially concede to the strikers because they're not the ones negotiating it. The annoying thing about Brexit was the people making the claims didn't have to implement it. They could say, we'll build 1 million hospitals, 350 squillion pounds a week for the NHS, because they weren't in government. So they would never have to implement it.
Think it's okay just to hand this on to whoever wins the next general election. If it's us, of course we'll get round the table. We have no idea what they're going to do to the economy in the meantime. Liz Truss crashed the economy last year. What are they going to do in the next 12 months? So of course I can't tell you what we're going to do, but I think it's unforgivable that they may even be considering just going, do you know what, we'll leave it to someone else. And that's certainly what it looks like. And I think doctors and all our healthcare workers deserve a hell of a lot better than that.
Well, our doctors should be looking after patients, not stood on picket lines. There has been 900...
Well, if that's an important thing for them to do, you should pay them accordingly. Yeah, it is important. Yeah, it's important. I would say far more important than what you do.
True.
1,000 cancelled appointments across the NHS, and it is absolutely unacceptable. What the government has done, it said it will stand by the independent pay body recommendations. For junior doctors, that's an 8.8% increase. That's the average salary for a junior doctor is £55,000. For a consultant, the average is £130,000. We absolutely need these doctors back in the health service. I think it's unacceptable.
If you need them back, pay them.
Yeah, it's one easy way to resolve this, mate.
Very easy.
That they can put people's safety, people's lives at risk in terms of not being in the hospitals where they're paid to be.
Again, not to be too much of a broken record here, but if doctors being away is really dangerous, pay them accordingly. Because if you notice when politicians go on their holidays, the country runs just fine.
It does indeed.
When we had the shutdowns and the bankers had to stay home, country carried on just fine.
Yeah, it's all fine. No
Whereas
issues.
Even people all the way down to like people who stack toilet paper on the shelves, the country comes to a grinding halt without them.
Very, very true.
So how are you going to do it? That's the thing, because they keep going on strike, and the BMA is saying it might go on strike indefinitely. Okay. How are you going to resolve this?
We've already legislated. There's something called the Minimum Service Level Bill, which was opposed by Labour, which requires, where we specify it, it requires certain parts of the economy, such as our train drivers, such as our healthcare workers, workers, and we're consulting on that now.
So your answer is make it illegal for them to strike. Brilliant.
Literally,
So-
ban this sick filth.
Much freedom.
put in place a minimum number of people to look after the patients in those hospitals. And that's exactly what we are doing. So it will make a massive difference.
Already.
They do that in France. They do that in Italy. They do it already.
But that workers do that.
Why aren't they there now then?
Yes,
Why
and
are
what
they
the
there
problem
now,
here,
then,
the
Tanya?
problem here is because the health secretary is not talking to them. It's months and months
35%
and
pay
months.
increase they're asking for.
And how are you
Is
going
that
to
what you
solve
settle it?
Okay, but if you're not even going to talk to them, right? You can't negotiate them down from 35%, can you?
No, very, very
Presumably
true.
They went into that, like all negotiations, highballing it, and you go in lowballing it, and you meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. Like, as someone who works in sales, that's literally how it works.
Yep, it's pretty straightforward, really, when you think about it. But the government are just like, no, that's the deal, take it or leave it. But if you leave it, we'll make it illegal for you to leave it. Thanks.
Yeah.
How are you going to solve it if you don't talk to them?
I've talked to them all the time. That process
it's just
continues.
not the
We've
case.
settled other disputes through negotiation. But how
Yeah,
would you
and
close
as
a
pointed
gap
out in chat, they can't make it illegal for doctors to move to America or Canada or Australia.
No, they can't make that illegal
That's
at all.
happening. Yeah.
And that is happening indeed.
8%
By
and
negotiating.
35%. So
By
where would you
negotiating,
negotiate to then?
And you would
What,
not negotiate
17,
live on
18%?
TV. That's not how you negotiate, and you know that. You need to talk to doctors in order to
tell me where
negotiate
you'd
with them.
settle.
It was months ago that the Secretary of State last spoke to them, and the Prime Minister.
So the government isn't prepared to talk to doctors about it, but they are prepared to talk to Sangam Debonair about the percentage rise. What the that's constructive.
That never has. Go and talk to them. Go and appreciate what they do, and then say, yes, there may be tough
So you would
questions.
settle at
We
higher
may have
8.8%.
difficult times ahead, but we have to do this by talking to each other. And you're not doing that. You are letting down patients.
And Kevin's
you
question-
are letting
You
down
settle
patients.
higher than
Your
8.8%.
government is letting. You can't put a figure out of thin air in the middle of a TV programme. That's not a good way to negotiate.
But you
It
say
will be
you go higher.
disrespectful to the taxpayer. It will be disrespectful to the doctors. But most of all, it will be disrespectful to the patients who are waiting for
Okay.
you to sort this out so that they can get treatment.
We are just going back and forth, and I feel we're not really getting anywhere. Let's hear from our audience. The woman there, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a nurse.
Well, let's hear what you think about it.
I voted strike in the last ballot. When I'm balloted again,
Based cast iron support. Let's go.
Yep, we
I will
solidarity
vote
forever.
strike again, and I'll do that continually until pay talks open and they're realistic. We are striking for pay. We are striking because we feel undervalued, but we're also striking for patient safety. So when we're accused of putting patients at risk, I say patients are at risk every single day of the week. We've got 7 million people on waiting lists. We've got 140,000 vacancies. People are dying on waiting lists. People are dying in the back of ambulances, and this cannot go on. The government need to get real and address the situation.
And are you convinced by what you're hearing from either party here?
As for the minimal service levels bill, what I say to that is unions on strike days, they put in minimal service levels already. This is nothing new. And I would say we welcome the government saying we want minimal staffing, but we want minimal staffing every single day of the week. I've worked in the NHS for almost 20 years. I did shifts nearly 15 years ago that were 27 hours long because there was no nurses to take over because we were so short-staffed. Now, that was nearly 15 years ago, and here we are now with the government talking about minimal service levels. Frankly, that is an insult to us all.
Okay, let's hear a bit more from
Haste! I wish I was in the audience because I would just be like, it's utterly shameful. It is so shameful that the government spent months not even coming around the table to discuss with either the nurses or the doctors. This was 12 months ago when Steve Barclay was, as I said before on this programme, I was saying Steve Barclay is sitting on his doing nothing whilst the potential for a strike was there, and he didn't even bother having a discussion. These are the people who he paid in claps during the pandemic as they kept our country going during a pandemic, right? The people who were the first response to one of the biggest catastrophes that our country has had to deal with in a very, very long time. The government has the gall to blame them for issues with the NHS after 13 years of underfunding, 13 years of deliberate attempt to privatise the network and devaluing our staff members, and then expecting claps to pay the bills. It is quite frankly completely disgusting, and they should be turfed out of government immediately. So much of this politics I can kind of wave away and just think, well, it's going to be shit, whatever, I'm just going to leave it. But when it comes to something as important as medical treatment for everybody, something that everyone has to rely on, something that's a basic human right, I'm sorry, I see red. the way the government has been treating the medical staff in this country.
To be fair, you always see red, though.
I mean, I do see red a lot.
Matthew.
Well, I genuinely think that the pay demands, particularly of the senior consultants, is wholly irresponsible. Have not people in the private sector taken real terms pay cuts during this cost of living?
So you should cuck yourself too.
The private sector have had higher wage increases on average than the public sector for the last 2 years.
Living crisis. Other public sector workers are much more sympathetic to the nurses. But I do think that one of the reasons that people admire doctors and are reasonably sympathetic to what they're doing is why we need a wider conversation about the National Health Service, not the people who work in it, but about the system. We talk about our NHS, a world-beating NHS. Do you remember during the pandemic where it said protect the NHS? Wasn't the NHS supposed to be protecting us?
But the question, Matthew,
The f is wrong with you? You brainwormed.
Times works for Murdoch wants bosses to be able to cash in on the NHS corpse.
Matthew, is what should the winner of the next general election do differently to resolve the doctors' pay specifically?
My own view is the government needs to hold out, and I think the public will have more sympathy if we stop deifying the NHS. It is not the best in the world. It has problems.
Used to be.
Look at the maternity.
Yeah, it was. It was very good at one point.
I wonder what year it was the best in the world. Can you take a guess of what year it was the best in the world, Kev?
1831.
No, it was 2010. I wonder what changed.
Yeah. True.
Scandals that recur with depressing frequency. I think we need to be intellectually honest rather than emotionally attached to a system that is not working as well as it could be. And I think that will add backbone to what I think is the right decision by the government.
Terms of service are so frustrating.
I hate them too.
The things I want to say about this human being. I mean, honestly, in many respects, they save me from myself, because the things I want to say about this man would probably get me a police visit. So, like, in some respects, it's probably actually a good guardrail for me.
It's testament to just how left-wing the public is in economics. Even after all of this attempted consent manufacturing for all of the journalist class, constant barrage of NHS is failing, we need to have a mixed system, we need to do what the Germans do, privatise. And after all of this, the public still massive, 80% support a public NHS.
To stand up to consultants who are earning £130,000, more than most people in comparable countries. And I think it's disingenuous to say we get in a room and suddenly it's all going to be sorted out. I suspect that will not happen. It needs a bit of backbone from the government. And on this, I think the government is correct.
About how much they get paid. It's about how much they get paid in other countries that are poaching our doctors. The consultants have already said multiple times they're not doing it because they want to have more personal money themselves. They're doing it to ensure that we don't have brain drain.
Yep.
The woman there in the blue sweater, yeah.
Isn't that their argument every time bankers' bonuses are brought up? Well, we don't want brain drain. I mean, in that sector, I would happily drive them to the airport. Whereas with doctors, we genuinely can't afford to have brain drain. We're already propped up by stealing other people, healthcare workers. Yeah. If ours actually start leaving, we are.
Yep.
Our doctors and nurses and our healthcare professionals would actually be on strike unless there was a valid reason. And I think that valid reason is that the government won't negotiate.
Okay.
Yeah.
The woman next to you had your hand up as well.
I think there's quite a dangerous dichotomy between what Matthew's saying about people deifying the NHS and what Kevin is doing, which is villainising people who work in medical services. You're putting people's lives at risk because you want to be paid more, and that's appalling. It's all politicised. During the pandemic, we were clapping these people so they felt like they had to go into hospitals, put themselves in dangerous situations where they were contracting COVID, dying of COVID, and now suddenly they actually want to be appreciated for the work they're doing above banging pots and pans, so they're being villainised for it. These people are some of the most highly qualified, most compassionate, hardest working people in our society. Yeah. And for you to sit there and villainise them because they want more money for the job they do, I think is appalling.
And
not just for more money, and not just for more money as well. It's also because they know that there's a risk to the future of the NHS if we don't fix the retention issue, if we don't fix the recruitment issue, and if we don't fix the brain drain issue, which is all to do with pay.
Yeah.
When it comes to the NHS, you demonise the doctors and the nurses who are going on strike. They are striking for patient safety. Majority of the NHS has been flogged off to the private sector. When the private sector get their hands on it, they cream off the top, subcontract out to others, and that's why the NHS is in such a bad state. They need to take their paws off our NHS.
Yes, I agree with Cockney Roy Orbison.
And the whole thing, the people at the bottom, disabled people, we are the ones who are suffering. We support the nurses, we support the doctors, we support the consultants, because without them, we are finished.
I honestly thought he was going to say. I thought he was so angry, and the F, I could do the F. I thought, hang on a minute, are they going to bleep it? What's?
I f***ing love this guy. What? Can we get this guy a medal? Can we clap for him?
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, that nurse and this bloke. Let's go.
Absolutely. What
Heroes.
Simons. All the points I wanted to make, you've made it for me.
Yeah.
I will not be able to afford my medications if it all goes private.
Okay. Okay.
Good
Thank you
lad.
for your point, sir. Yes, Ella.
I think I'm the only person on this panel that can very openly say I support the strikes. I think I was on the programme.
I guess Spiked did used to be called living Marxism. Maybe she's the last living Marxism of Spiked.
Well, yeah, but it just she calls herself a libertarian.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's cool. What?
Last time when it was the nurses and I said the very same, it seems to me a no-brainer that you make sure that the staff within an institution like the NHS don't just feel good, don't just feel like they are appreciated, whatever the hell that means, but are paid properly, that have the right kind of income for the work that they're doing. And, you know, I hate this row about you negotiate, no, you negotiate, you talk. Come out and say what your position is. You don't have to put a percentage point on it. You don't have to put a number on it. Do you support the idea that a worker is a worker and resist all of this kind of, I'm sorry, Kevin, but emotional blackmail that gets put on NHS workers about the idea that you're killing people if you're going on strike? And, you know, the government's solution to it, again, you have this waffle from politicians about how they care about the cost of living crisis and whatever else. And then when it comes down to workers getting on a picket line and saying, here are the facts, here is the situation of my quality of life, and it's not matching up with what I'm getting paid, what are you going to do about it? The government cripples workers' rights by instituting minimum services, by flirting with the idea of essentially, by the back door, banning strikes. I think that's appalling and should be resisted. But
Jesus Christ, the stop clock has never been righter.
I know, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go.
But I also want to see something more substantial from if the opposition thinks it's got a chance in 2024. Everybody knows you can hide behind the, you know, it's very clever to say I won't negotiate on television thing. I don't think anyone's suggesting that you should put forward a figure. But does the Labour Party,
Kevin
the
was.
party of the people, the party of the working people, whatever you want to call it, do they support working people? Are you in favour of giving
Well, considering they sacked shadow cabinet member for going to a picket line.
Picket line, yeah.
Maybe not.
meeting in any way, shape or form the demand of workers, or are you just going to pontificate by saying we'll talk to them? As it happens, they don't want to be talked to, they want their demands met.
One of the first things we're going to do if we win the next general election is bring in an employment act that will actually strengthen workers' rights, strengthen unions' ability to negotiate with employers, but also we're going to bring in an NHS workforce plan, because I think we're ignoring the nurse's point here, which is the NHS is understaffed on non-strike days and has been for years. When I first got into Parliament, I raised that. Yes, that's part of the employment bill that Angie Rayner, as our employment spokesperson, will be bringing in the first 100 days of a Labour government if we win the next general election, to strengthen the ability to negotiate, to strengthen union rights, to undo some of the damage that Tory governments have done. But the NHS workforce plan is part of that, because that's why the nurse here has had to stay over hours for so many times. We need to address that as well.
I need to. Hang on, Matthew. I need to allow Kevin to address some of the points that were made from the back very powerfully, that you are vilifying staff in the NHS.
That's absolutely not what I said. What I said is where doctors are...
You literally said they're putting lives at risk, mate.
Yeah, literally. I don't know how else that could be described as explicitly vilification.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely don't know what you could say that would be worth. I don't know how you can up the ante on that one, really.
Yeah, quite.
You're literally saying that people will die because of them. I would suggest that's emotional blackmail, mate. Yeah.
Quite, yeah.
For a group of people who have literally dedicated their entire adult lives to the opposite of the thing you're saying they're doing.
Quite.
And junior doctors...
And unlike you, have literally taken an oath to protect people's fucking lives.
True.
You've taken an oath to the Queen and her descendants.
What they heard.
They should be in looking after patients, not on picket lines. That's what I said. In terms of minimum service levels, is not banning striking. You have minimum service levels in France, in Italy, in Spain, Australia, the USA,
right.
including ban on blue light services.
Right.
We're not an outlier, though, Ella. I think the point...
Yeah, other countries are full of wankers as well.
True.
Thanks, yeah. That makes me feel a lot better.
I don't know your name. And there are many, many fantastic people who work in the NHS, nurses, doctors. There's no way in the world I am villainising what you do. But I understand that the service is under massive pressure, despite the fact there are almost 300,000 more doctors and nurses working in the NHS today than there were in 2010. We're the third highest at household level in terms of funding of the NHS in Europe. There is massive...
we have record waiting lists,
There has not been an increase since
Kevin.
2010. The percentage of services provided by private
Kevin, I want to get a little bit more
It is
audience
demand
in.
that's causing the problem, and it will be an issue for many years to come.
Man there in the glasses. Yes, you, sir, with the blue shirt. Yes.
Thank you. The least the government can do is to reach out to the team who are striking. I think that's a basic responsibility. And secondly, they can do is to come up with the right fact. They shouldn't come up with the figures like junior doctor will earn 55 and consultants earn 130. You know that's not right fact. And thirdly,
the average
they should do is to say that the overall consultant body has increased. According to the government figures, there is more than 8,000 consultant posts vacant currently. And what they can do is to bring real facts to the people from 2010 till 2022. This is a jointly published fact from BBC, NHS, FT. Matthew might be aware of it. Effectively, consultants are the worst hit group. 22% cut in the pay in the last 13 years. And if you don't want to see other facts, I don't want to bore you all, but 1 in 3 junior doctors have voted to step out of UK once they are qualified. Why do you think that's the case? When there are so many doctors voting quite literally from the feet, I think it's high time for government to really think. I mean, we can sit here and blame or point fingers. That's a bit lazy, some might say. Oh, why are they striking? Why shouldn't they saving? Because you're not reaching out to listen to them.
We are going to have to give you the final word, sir.
Yeah, it's fair. Like at one point, we were a magnet for the world's best and brightest. They'd come here and work in the NHS. They were paid well. Their standards were not necessarily perfect, but were a lot better than they are now. Whereas now, they can't wait to fucking leave.
Yeah, there was just like so much desire, like from the press, just to try and get more prioritisation and to be so solidarity with the government, ironically, in this dispute. And that all of the audience, literally, apart from that one army guy, because they're always scabs, everybody else was like fully behind the doctors, fully behind the strikes, and fully behind the public NHS. It just shows that all of that manufacturing consent can only go so far.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it sounds trite, I suppose, but people don't enjoy being ill and die. And seeing that happen to their family members. So literally anything that can stop that. And then you look at things like, the American system, there's no one in Britain that wants any part of that.
Nope.
No, it's just a nightmare of a situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lucky man said there, if you're disabled,
literally what people have at the very least.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I think about my mother, for instance, who is a diabetic. There's no way we could afford insulin. She'd have to ration insulin. She'd probably be dead given her age, unfortunately.
Right, so
grim. So yeah, you can only manufacture consent so hard when people literally go into the NHS and see how hard people are working and what a good system it is and can be.
Exactly. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing. It does help the channel and the algorithm. And if you click the bell notification icon, it will let you know when I go live and when I upload videos. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my handle is @NoJusticeMTG, and that is Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. If you want to support my channel in a more financial manner, you can do so by becoming a member for just 99p, by super chatting, or by supporting me on Patreon, with the link is in the description of this video. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next segment.